Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight I want to welcome John Barnwell. He is the founder of American Intelligence Media Conclave at aimfortruth.org, former co-host of the Leo Lion Zagami channel, and former manager of the esoteric bookstore, the Mayflower Bookshop near Detroit. He is also author of The Arcana of the Holy Grail Angel, The Spiritual Science of the Holy Blood and of the Holy Grail, and The Arcana of Light on the Path, The Star Wisdom of the Tarot, and Light on the Path. John, welcome. How you doing tonight?
I'm very good, thank you. It's a little bit of a stretch to say I'm a founder of American Intelligence Media. I'm best friends with the founder and his wife, and that's something that just kind of evolved organically out of things that they were doing in their own more spiritual studies. But as the world began to evolve into this whole socio-economic political drama, it was hard to ignore. And so,
very good. Fair enough. Now, there's so many areas of research you cover, from history, Egyptology, mysticism, Western esotericism. I mean, the list goes on in your bio. But tonight, I want to not only get your insight into our current state of our society, but maybe go into a little bit deeper into higher levels of the control system, trying to understand the bigger picture as to what's really going on and some of the agendas that are unfolding right now and what may possibly be coming. And if there's any solutions, maybe we could offer some. First, I'd like to start with a little bit more about yourself, your background, and kind of what led you down your current path.
Well, as you said, I was the manager of Mayflower Bookshop, which is the largest metaphysical, esoteric, and holistic bookstore in the world. And so consequently, being there all those years, back in the heyday, back before the internet, when people actually read things called books. There's like these things that are behind me, right? And so consequently, that was a golden opportunity in that I met many leading authors and spiritual teachers, health gurus. I helped develop curricula for people like that. They would come in and they were working a particular path of study, and I would feed them new materials, trying to stay on top of all of that. Ultimately, what that led to is I was able to take charge of one of the largest esoteric libraries in the world, and I created a relational database. I didn't create the database itself, but I loaded it with every book in the library with computerized cross-references according to subjects and all of that. And then after I did that, I continued doing that same kind of work in one of the largest private Egyptology and Mesopotamian studies libraries, and created a relational database on that, which is interesting because most people, I mean, almost everybody, face it, has no idea that the sheer volume of information that's available to scholars in specific disciplines. And so I was able to kind of peek behind the curtain and see where they were at. What was interesting in that, though, was that I felt as if there was a general lack of understanding of the principles of genuine esoteric knowledge in the people and the way that they were attempting to riddle through some of the information that they were getting off of hieroglyphics and cuneiform and ancient languages, and not having it within their purview that there's an evolution of consciousness, and that these earlier cultures were dealing in a realm to where clairvoyance was a faculty that people had. They were able to see nature spirits and angels. So the further you go in history, the more that recedes until the real turning point in time, as Rudolf Steiner pointed out, was the incarnation of Christ. And from there, we've been evolving up through that. We're in a very challenging time right now because the structuralism of materialism that really gained ground in the 1840s, what that led to was a type of thinking that is incapable of understanding the world in its own terms. And in the spiritual world, important events were happening that culminated in 1879, causing certain types of beings to enter more closely, more intimately into the human realm. And so what you have at this time is a spiritual struggle that's going on within the souls of individual human beings. And so it becomes a question of what can help individuals maintain the center between the adversarial forces. And so that's been a core issue of my path, and that's what I deal with in my first book, like 640 pages, to give people the kind of symbolic, esoteric understandings to help give them tools to be able to riddle through these things. The riddle aspect is extremely important, because if you don't have areas of study that you don't understand immediately, your thought structures become like a desert. They become arid. They don't grow. You have to have something in you that a teacher gives you when you're a small child, that later in life you can remember back and go, aha, I see what that represents. And so that there's a connective tissue, so to speak, between the dream realm of childhood and the more developed thinking of adulthood.
Very well said. Now, what I want to get into to start with tonight, it's there always seems to have been this divine right to rule when it comes to those in power, and those at the top always seem to be steering society in desired directions. And when it comes to the direction we're currently headed, it's at least clear to me that this is one of those instances where we're being steered to completely change society. And I don't think any of what we're seeing is natural. It's quite the opposite. I believe it's been planned possibly for a very long time. Now, in your thoughts, how far back should we look when it comes to the planning of a massive global psychological warfare campaign, basically?
Well, that's quite a mouthful, because you see, that's a direct development out of that tendency that I was just discussing, is that, because see, materialism thrives within a realm of short thinking. You know, skip all that. Just get to it, right? You know, and so those are the people that think we're like walking around pieces of meat, and that thoughts are something that is a result of some kind of chemistry that's going on in your brain. They've never left their body and in a conscious way. And when you have the experience of leaving your body, where you can like look down at the top of your head, like I have, it becomes very clear to you that your body is like you're driving a car or something. It's not you. It's something that you are inhabiting. You're a spiritual being having material experiences. You're not a material being that has the possibility of spiritual experiences. But they want to take that away. I mean, back in 1879, there was a proclamation that solidified that within the Catholic Church, for example. And they, that man doesn't have a spirit, that man is a being of body and soul, and he can only have certain spiritual experiences, but he doesn't have an individual human spirit, which is completely in violation of the Pauline doctrine. If you read scripture closely, you see it's very clear about body, soul, and spirit. So we're spiritual beings, and consequently, what's at issue right now is they hate that. I mean, just the other day, I was watching a documentary on C.S. Lewis, and he started doing broadcasts in England because he was an atheist, and he was converted back to Christianity by J.R.R. Tolkien. And Tolkien, as everybody knows, is the author of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all of that. And consequently, Lewis began to write books coming out of this conversion, his realization of the spiritual reality behind the Christian mysteries. And he was like the biggest radio personality in England. And at Oxford, in the middle of this documentary, I'm watching it, and the gentleman who was speaking, I don't remember his name right now, but he's one of the scholars who deals with the group called the Inklings, which is that literary circle that Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and Owen Barfield and all these brilliant Oxford dons and all of that weren't buying into the materialism that had become the basis of the curriculum at the university. And he says, you know, at the university, they hate Christianity. And you go, I mean, that's pretty strong stuff when you consider the significance of Oxford University within the fabric of British society. So you could see that the core issues regarding what you're talking about have to do with the halls of education and what's known as government by journalism, a concept that was revealed through our studies working with our associates over at Americans for Innovation, Michael McKibben, the inventor of social media. And we found that people keep saying about how the intelligence community has infiltrated the media and all this, and that's exactly wrong. The Imperial Press Conference of 1909 was paid for by Burroughs Wellcome Chemical Pharmaceutical Company, which is now GlaxoSmithKline, and it had 650 journalists from all over the British Empire, including representatives from the United States, from the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Chicago Tribune, and others, how to control society through media was the thrust of the conference. And it was the preface to the book that was published for all the members of that particular event is Lord Rosebery, who was the husband of Hannah de Rothschild. So you see, this is the superstructure of the banking cartels, the NGOs, non-government organizations like the Carnegie Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and all of these various groups that are composed of insiders, the core of which is a society that's called the Pilgrims Society. And that's located in London and in New York, and these individuals, they invite anybody who becomes an ambassador in the United States. This is the genesis of that so-called special relationship between Britain and the United States. That's where it came from back in 1902 and 1903. And so, I mean, I'm giving a lot of details, but anybody who wants to fill in the blanks can go to American Intelligence Media, aimfortruth.org, or Americans for Innovation. And Americans for Innovation has a more than 20-year crime line of the more current cascade of disinformation, propaganda, manipulation, and finding so much that has infiltrated our society. I mean, we did extensive studies on the senior executive service, the bureaucrats that most Americans have never heard of, that are civilian generals within our government, for example. I mean, it's a huge superstructure. I don't know what to say. The deep state is largely corporate, and the secret government is basically your bureaucrats, like the senior executive service, for example. And they're beneath all the cabinet posts, and they're the ones that block initiatives that they don't want to go forward and give no bid contracts to usually British companies like Serco, the largest company you never heard of, who runs our patent trademark office. Go figure, why should the United States Patent Trademark Office be run by a British company, run by Rupert Soames, who's the grandson of Winston Churchill? I mean, it's so tidy. I mean, it staggers the mind, because they've been working at this. Largely, it has to do with the devolution of the British Empire. As that started to fall apart, okay, what are we going to do? Well, they turned it into a financial empire. And consequently, there are links to things that happened at 9/11, for example, and many other key events. I mean, some people remember during 9/11 when Tower 7 fell down, the BBC broadcast that I won't call him a journalist, but the presenter on BBC is talking about Building 7 coming down, and you can look in the picture behind you, which is live, and the building's still there. So, I mean, what they're telling us is not based on reality. And so, consequently, their version of the world actually doesn't have any power, because it's not based on truth. And the more you can align yourself with truth, the more power you will have. And the greatest power in the universe is the individual human spirit.
Now, earlier you mentioned a couple of things that are at the core of all the problems here with our society: the education system and the media. And I kind of want to talk about each of those things individually. The education system, for instance, now we can't even have our kids going to school. The indoctrination before, when our kids were in school and actually in the classroom being taught by somebody, was extreme. I can only imagine what it's going to be when they're plugged into a computer and all the curriculum is just coming at them through, the internet. So what are your thoughts on especially where we're going with our new education system?
Well, it's where we've been going, and to a large extent, if you look at the genesis of modern education, it's been overrun by neo-Marxists, basically. They're known collectively as the Frankfurt School, and it was a group of academics that realized the failures of the Soviet way of doing things, the way Soviet Russia was, and they were in Frankfurt, Germany, and because of the circumstances of the war and all of that, they migrated to the United States. And you also have quite a development within the United States with Marxists. I mean, they always demonize what went on in the McCarthy hearings, but there was meat on those bones. There really was a communist movement in the United States, and it really was active in the film industry and in the media and all of that. And so if you look at and see who owns these things, there's certain key names that keep cropping up. It's always the same characters, these oligarchs, right? But if you get into the Frankfurt School, and you can go on Wikipedia, you can look up the Frankfurt School, and you can get the names of all these characters. And but they're one of the key individuals is Herbert Marcuse, and here's a book a critique of pure tolerance. Okay, I mean, does that describe what's going on today? I mean, are we allowed to tolerate that? I don't. Is it okay for you to say? I don't think it's okay for you to say that. You're going to hurt my feelings. I mean, they have this whole kind of weird structuralist approach to the world, like they got some kind of better mousetrap that they're offering us, and they're going to force it down our throats, and it's just, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. All you got to do is be a student of history. Try and find a successful socialist government. There's never been one. Never, ever. A good example of socialism is the abject poverty in Venezuela. And it was the same cast of characters that brought that about in Venezuela. Venezuela was the second most successful economy in South America, okay, behind Chile. And during Jimmy Carter, they put in certain initiatives having to do with electronic voting machines. There was a program written in this project down there, and that's how the communists were able to take over the country. It was through a corrupted voting system, right? So, but you look at the cast of characters that to this day, and I have in my files, I don't want to keep digging up files here, but there's all these same people keep cropping up, and you got your George Soros but these characters from the British Privy Council, like Lord Malak Brown, who was the co-founder of the Open Society Foundation. And people talk about Soros, but who talks about? We're the only people that talk about Lord Malak Brown. I mean, who's that guy? Well, he was like number 2 at the UN at one time, and he's a very significant figure. But people don't know about this. It's not going to be covered in the media, and so consequently, people such as yourself are out there digging. They want to figure out what's going on, who's doing it, and why. And it's real simple. Why? They just want to be in control, and they have this kind of weird material take on what a human being is, and some of them actually think that they'd be better off if they were transferring their consciousness into some kind of robot. I mean, it's like Terminator stuff, you know. And there are people that think that. I'm not saying that they're correct, but it's an interesting thing, and it really is an outgrowth of some of the longings. Like, I knew Timothy Leary pretty well. I had a few encounters with him. One time I took him to dinner in Greektown here in Detroit when he was in town, and he started explaining to me about his ties with the CIA and all of that, and their relationship to the drug experiments. And there's so much behind the hippie movement that has to do with intelligence, and that it makes it easier to understand why so many of the people that are in entertainment, in film, and in the music business are on the wrong side of this equation, that have bought into this nonsense about global warming even. I mean, that's kind of the acid test for me. If somebody really thinks that carbon credits has a relationship to global warming, then they haven't done their math. You know, Lord Monckton proved unequivocally that the correlation that they were using to try and exaggerate this whole global warming nonsense didn't even include the sun in their calculations. So it's just a big farce. In fact, the original concept came out of Enron. You know, that the guys that were totally corrupted got totally busted. Yeah, but they were the ones that came up with this formula. So you see that there's all this spin and disinformation and all this nonsense that's swirling around. And so now what do? You go out and you get in your car, you drive somewhere, you drive by, you look over, there's a guy in a car with all the windows closed with a mask on. And so that's what we're looking at. That's the level of cognitive development that we're struggling with. And yeah, I mean, I laugh, and it's a bitter laugh, because it really isn't funny in the real sense, although it is hilarious, because you have to realize that the greatest thing you can do to thwart the devil is laugh in his face.
Very well said. Now, you know, something else you mentioned with the technology and those that want to see, you know, possibly us becoming AI robots in the future. With the rate of that technology is going, we had the indoctrination through the media, and it went hand in hand with education. Now we have social media and all this technology growing where we can actually integrate it with ourselves. And it seems that, you know, it's all targeted through the youth. The younger people are, you know, going to be integrated with this technology. So now, where do you see us going with the future of this, where we're not going to have any kids going to schools? Everything's going to be all online, integrated through technology. The indoctrination is going to be so high through this social media, through everything that's going to be pumped in through that. So where do you see our future going, you know, in that direction? And is there any way to kind of turn this around or put a stop to this?
That's an interesting challenge, isn't it? And it's kind of late in the game, shall we say, with all this going on, and a lot of people have been getting red-pilled. And it's really interesting because, I mean, everybody's talking about being red-pilled, and Neo and the Matrix and all of that. And really there's a mythic content there that is really relevant to what we're looking at here. And it's interesting. I was in a conversation yesterday with a friend of mine who's a leading music for film and television producer, who I'm going to be doing a thing with tomorrow, Cyril Victor, and we were discussing the cutting edge of physics and where it's at right now, and basically the ideas that they work with in physics are largely spiritually bankrupt, and it can't really solve what is this? What is this thing we're in? Because it's involved in this whole kind of mathematical determinism of material development, and that whole model is doomed to fail because it doesn't take into account the reality of spiritual beings. And consequently, you say, well, where are all these beings? Well, you can't see them. Some people can, but apparently you can't right now. You used to be able to in other lifetimes, but now you've descended down here so far, you can't see them. But in the future, you'll see them again. And you say, well, where are they? What signs do we have that they exist? Well, if you look into the heavens and you see that there's planets and there's stars and all that, everywhere that you see something like that, that shows you that there's beings there. But people have this concept. They want beings to be like them, to be these kind of carbon units that breathe oxygen. But they're not necessarily, that's not the way that they manifest necessarily. And there are other planets that are not physical that we can't even see. There are people that have the ability to relate to those realms. So there's consequently quite a convergence of various realities happening at this time. And basically what it amounts to is it's up to individuals to align themselves with, in my relation to it, it's fundamentally the Christ mystery, which has to do with the redemption of what it means to be human. and that Christ came, and he's now here, and it's up to us to consciously take up the task of being able to find him and develop a participatory consciousness, we might say, to where we can participate in the unfoldment of this Christ mystery, which has to do with the I am. That for Moses was outside in the burning bush, and then you see it entering fully into the human realm within Jesus Christ. Now, that's a challenge, of course, because history's had a pretty sketchy record of how they're going to treat you if you think along those lines. So consequently, persecution is very possible, especially from the materialists, the dialectical materialist communists. You know, they hate that. So I just try to maintain a sense of humor amidst all this nonsense and not let it, you don't want to become like them by struggling with them. Don't let them trigger you. And all this nonsense going in all these blue cities right now has to do with them. They want to trigger us to be like them and create a civil war. They want a civil war. They want chaos. This is how the George Soros and all the factions that he represent, the color revolutions going on previously in Europe and the Arab Spring and all these things, they're all fake. They're all psyops. And I'm sorry, but this is just a bunch of nonsense we're being told to divide us.
Now, you mentioned the spiritual beings. Now, there are, apparently beings of light that are good and benevolent, and beings of darkness that are malevolent, and probably everything in between. Now, when it comes to those in control, these elites, there's many theories as to what these beings that they could be either communicating with or been influenced by, that it could be, they could be Satanists, they could be practicing Satanism, or something much older. What are your thoughts as to their line of spiritual practices or beliefs?
Wow. Well, you opened Pandora's box there. Okay. Well, you see, and again, somebody may think that I'm too crazy. They probably already changed the channel by now. Good. You're not ready for this. But meanwhile, the rest of you that are still here, yes, there are those groups that are pursuing the dark side avidly. And going back to what I said early on, there was basically a spiritual war in 1879, and what are known as the harmonic spirits. They're retarded spiritual beings that didn't complete their evolution in an earlier stage, and now they count on attempting to inhabit human beings and use that to further their development. So you have your spirits of darkness and materiality, the harmonic, what many call the satanic, okay? And then you have your luciferic, which is these beings that are of another nature, and they'll tell you the world is all illusion, and Ahriman will tell you the spiritual world's all illusion. So there's you dwell between this polarity of beings, right? And so consequently, what's needed is to find the equilibrium between these two realms. And that's the Christ mystery right there. And so you see, there's a lot of symbolical images. Christ was crucified between the thief and a murderer. But yet the thief was able to be one of the only two people pointed out that Jesus happened to say, he said to him, "You shall be with me with my Father in heaven." So there's only two people that we know made it, based upon the testimony of the New Testament. And so consequently, there are beings that are referred to in various traditions, and I've studied almost all of it. Like I said, I have a background in most of the esoteric systems, and I used to puzzle gurus. I'd be there talking to them, and they realized that I wasn't one of their guru followers. I was very clear that I'm a Christian. Kind of a little startled from that, and that's okay. I think that you have to, like, you hit on something very important. When you get into the nature of all the various types of beings, there's a full spectrum. It's like the city of New York. You go there and you see every possible different variety. This one's good at that, not good at this. This one could do this, but he can't do the other one. This one's good at tennis, but he can't play chess. And there's all manner of details involved with these things. And so it could be overwhelming to try and approach it until you've found your own base. And so I don't recommend that people get too captivated by those types of studies until they've found their rudder, that they have firmly established themselves as an individual human being and are able to create a sacred space. Then you could approach these things with understanding a wholesome way. But to get into this dark thing that you're talking about, yes, there's what's and Sabtai Tzvi in 1666 he lived in Salonika in Turkey, and he declared that he was the Messiah. Now that was at a time when the Cossacks were doing a really slaughtering thousands of Jews in Poland and Ukraine, and there was really a bad time, and so consequently he was able to gain many estimates say 1 million followers or more. But the idea behind Sabbateanism is what's called antinomial. And that means that rather than following the Ten Commandments, that they violate them intentionally, that they go against. And so you go down the list of the Ten Commandments, and they raise to the ranks by violating all those commandments. And so they're a direct opposition to the wishes of the good God, so to speak. But they feel that, the theory, which was developed even further by a guy named Jakob Frank, who came along a while later, who was a Polish Jew, and he was aligned with members of the Rothschild family. And so consequently, he became very successful, had quite a following. And so you see, like Eyes Wide Shut, for example, what's hinted at in that movie. I did a podcast with Julianne Davis, who was in that movie a while ago. And that type of activity that's shown in that movie, that kind of stuff really goes on. I was at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump's resort down in Florida, and I was being told a story by the gentleman who had us as guests there at Mar-a-Lago, and he starts talking about how he was invited to a party at a chateau in France, and he went there, and there were all these women in designer gowns, but bare-breasted with pierced nipples with like diamonds hanging from their nipples and from their ears. It's like entry level, and you get into this thing. It's like entering into Dante's in levels of depravity that are involved. So remember, many people heard of the Dutch banker who came out and he did an expose. I forget his name right now, but he was very much involved. He'd go to parties like that, and finally he gets to a point, and he's a successful banker. They say, well, if you want to get to the next level, you need to sacrifice a child. He's like, wait a minute. I mean, come on, think about it. What is that? And so these mysteries of Malak that are mentioned in the Bible, and Baal, and a lot of these different practices of what they're called in the Kabbalah, the mixed multitude, the Erev Rav, the ones that Moses let come with him out of Egypt, but weren't a part of the. He was warned against it. Remember, God warned him against bringing these people, and he brought them, and he goes away for a little while, and he comes back, and they're worshiping the golden calf and doing. I was saying, wait a minute, that's not what we're doing here. So he had trouble struggling with it, and that's kind of a mythic representation of something that's very real. So you have these different streams in human history that are inspired by various different hierarchical spiritual beings, some very wholesome, some not so wholesome. Some became redeemed through the Christ event. Other ones as still continue and absolutely reject the reality of the incarnation of the Logos. So it's a spiritual war going on. We are in a spiritual war, and people are kind of falling asleep in front of the television sets. See, most of my life I never owned a television set, so I feel very fortunate because there's a lot of programming embedded in these programs and in commercials and all that. It's not too wholesome. But meanwhile, so I'm watching this. I pick it up now. I'm watching, like the other day, I'm watching this show, Person of Interest, and it's an interesting series about AI, and it gets to the 5th season in 2016, and it's basically describing events that are what we're going through today, with that there was an episode later in the season where they're exposed to this virus, and there's this whole thing going on. It's like, well, that reminds me of the 2012 document that was financed by the Rockefeller Foundation that talked about Operation Lockdown, and they talked about what could be the end game were they to approach it with this kind of sequestering of the populace, But basically what they want to do is they want to drive the populace into the cities, these smart cities, and have everybody under control, and make the planet like kind of a theme park for the elites, so they could just have fun because they're better than us. Don't you know that? I mean, it's sick. I mean, I try to not get lost in the darkness of the thing, but you have to maintain a sense of humor because really, they're childs. Bill Gates is such a child. I mean, that guy, he just oozes lack of development. And George Soros too. They're clever. They're very clever. They're gonna.
Now, you talked about herding everybody into smart cities, and we talked a little bit earlier about the, how some possibly want to upload everyone's consciousness into robots. Do you think that's the ultimate goal, is just to have a more material society where we're less human, not spiritual, possibly part robot, kind of a Borg mind, Borg mentality, under complete control, and under complete control, monitoring, censored, no free speech? You think this is what the ultimate goal is for our society?
Well, it's what they want to do. I mean, way back in, what I believe it was 1916, Rudolf Steiner said that in future, they will develop a vaccine that will make it impossible for you to have spiritual thoughts. I mean, think about that. It's this whole idea of that which is the mechanical world taking over and it's that whole like binary. There's no middle in there. It's binary. It's twofold. It's on, off, on, off, on, off. But a human being's a threefold mystery, like the Trinity that's referred to in Christianity. It's body, soul, and spirit, thinking, feeling, and will, as it was so greatly articulated by the German philosopher Fichte. But people don't read Fichte anymore. So it becomes a question. Somebody asks you a question. They say, well, what do you think about that? And you say, well, I feel. Well, no, he didn't ask you what you thought or felt. He asked you, well, what do you think about that? And how many times have you thought something was a good idea, but your feelings were contraindicating what you were going to do, but then you can watch your hand and it's going to grab another candy bar. So there's these three realms in you, and you think we like to think of ourselves as this whole integrated being, yet we have these three very oftentimes independent realms working in us, and so consequently it's like the image, the chariot being pulled by three horses, the thinking, the feeling, the will, or kind of riding along in this inn. You have the skull is like the Grail castle. That's the castle of Klingsor, and the Luciferic spirits, and then coming out of the deep dark realm of the will is these harmonic spirits. But see, the harmonic spirits want to gain access to that castle. They want to take over that castle. They want to bring it into complete materiality. But these things that we talk about, they can't comprehend the love. And see, love is that's the secret formula that we have. And coming from love, even loving your enemies, that's the real challenge. And so consequently, you say, is that loving? And so when you say somebody and they express some manner of behavior, you have to, the ultimate acid test is that a loving concept? Of course, we're not very evolved, and it's not, love is not our second nature, but what the word love is used, I think 17 times in the Gospel of John. That's more times than it's used in the whole Quran. So for me, I'll go with the Gospel of John.
Now, when it comes to those in high levels of control, I personally I don't follow any political party, and I don't trust any world leader or political leader. That being said, there are some very close friends of mine and researchers that completely believe that Trump is going to lead us out of this, and he is on the good side, and he's fighting for us and the basically the good side of things. I am personally am not sold on that, but I'm open-minded. I'd like to get your thoughts on if there is any good side of this, any so-called white hats that are trying to work against this on a higher level than just us trying to expose the truth, if you know what I mean.
Well, that is the loaded question, isn't it? And like somebody said to me the other day, well, have faith in President Trump. I said, no, I have faith in God. I have hope for President Trump. And so I think it's people are putting too big a burden on that man. How much can he bear? How much can he withstand? How much can he understand? I mean, he thinks that 5G is great, and anybody who's worked in the more developed areas of health know that one of the most important aspects of the function of the human body is on an electrochemical level, and consequently there's been a lot of information that's starting to come out. There was one I found on PubMed the other day dealing with the effect of 5G and in creating corona type, having cells casting off. See, it's funny because people don't know a lot about biology and all of that, but you have what are called exosomes that are ejections from cells that it's like taking out the garbage. You eject dysfunctional DNA and RNA out of cells all the time in these kind of little packets that are like these corona little critter things, right? And so, but when we get exposed to these types of critters, we'll call them, that'll get past the search engines, I think. These little critters from other species that have been through a transition through certain species that can bring them closer to the human realm and make it possible for us to have a problem with them because it has to do with cell receptors. You have to look at these exosomal events as they're like a thumb drive, right? They're not alive. They're like a thumb drive that have like RNA packet in there, and it can lock onto cell receptors and reprogram the cell. That's how you have to look at those types of. That's what they are. They're not alive. So it's consequently they're in another realm between being a mineral or being an animal, a plant. They're just this nether realm, and so consequently. I went on a tangent here, but because it's an important tangent, because what's needed is for people to take responsibility for their own psychological space. Because, see, one of the things that makes you most vulnerable to incursions from that realm, because you're always exposed to just trillions and trillions of different germs and bacteria and viruses and all. They don't always get the upper hand. What gives them the upper hand is when you have a weakened immune system. And that can happen through various types of stress, such as electrical fields, bad diet, a lack of certain nutrients like zinc or vitamin C, vitamin D3, which you get normally from sunlight, or vitamin A. These types of things, and trace minerals such as I like to eat, like seaweed, to help keep up the trace minerals, because your fluids in your body are basically an internal ocean. They have the same mineral balance as the ocean. So consequently, there's so many dimensions of this in somebody's particular path. You don't have a manual. They didn't give you an instruction manual how to be a human being. They didn't do that. It's up to you. But now we have the possibility of self-educating ourselves. But we have to learn how to sift through things and find things that are worthwhile. And it's interesting because we have the internet. It's given us this access, and they really don't want us to know these things, but their whole system is tied into the internet, so they can't shut it down. Although they may at some point do that because they want to upgrade to some new level of nightmare of which we're not aware yet. But they're going to lose ultimately. As far as President Trump, I have hopes for him. I'm disappointed in the way he buys into the 5G thing, and seems to be even buying into the whole thing with the corona, corona. It's like I don't know. I hope that he wakes up. I mean, Fauci, we were the ones that our researchers friends at Americans for Innovation were the ones that found the patents on the coronavirus that were held by the Purebright Institute. Yeah, Purebright Institute, that's, one of the principal investors in the Purebright Institute is Bill Gates. Now you go, well, what's Purebright? Well, Lord Purebright, he's one of the most important of the Rothschilds, with the whole events I was talking about earlier, because it was Lord Purebright and Lord Rosebery were the two principal Rothschild family representatives tied into the development of media and its interlocking relationship with the intelligence development of MI5, MI6, and GCHQ, and the development in America of FBI and CIA and all that whole special relationship that has certain unhealthy aspects. But within all of those organizations, there are people that are patriotic. And so I'm finally getting around to your original question. Are there white hats? Yes, there are. But are they restrained by the bureaucracy in which they live? Yes, they are. But there have been brave souls that have come out, and they paid dearly for it. And there's this whole international level of it between London, Washington, Rome with the Vatican, and also the Israeli connection that's been, so much has come out about what's going on with Ghislaine Maxwell and that whole thing with the Pedo Island, and there's just so many unwholesome aspects of it. But the big control file syndrome, like the 9 of the 12 policemen in New York that were able to look in the laptop, the infamous laptop, 9 out of 12 of them are dead. And so in the insurance file of, what's his name, Anthony Weiner's laptop. So consequently, these people play for keeps. But they're a bunch, I mean, you look at Anthony Weiner, what a freaking nerd. I mean, this guy's, these are, the beta males are trying to run the world. It's like Bill Gates and Anthony, look at these characters. John Podesta. I mean, these are the kids that are getting even because they got picked on in school. That's who these people are. I'm sorry, but it's a joke.
No,
they
you're
have
right.
Run into a real Templar.
Excuse me, I have to agree with you. Now, with everything that's happening, they're really trying to push the Rona thing, even though people are waking up to it. People aren't falling for it anymore. Everywhere I go outside, when I walk outside, I see everyone wearing masks. You can't go anywhere in public now in my area without a mask. It's pretty much all nationwide. I'm pretty sure they're not done with the whole Rona agenda. I'm pretty sure that they're going to ramp it up again in the coming months, probably September, October. We may see another massive outbreak and possibly a shutdown. But like I said, the good news is a lot of people are waking up to it. But do you think it'll be enough to where we can kind of push back against this? And what are the solutions? What can we do to push back before all our rights are taken away, before we don't have anything left that we can fight for?
Well, that's a excellent question, and I have to look here and dig up something here for a second. Let me take a peek here. I have to shut the sound off so I don't have it talking over me. But it's the, wait a minute, here we go.
Yeah, no worries. Take your time.
It's okay. Yeah, Yuri Bezmenov, okay? There's a fascinating interview that's available on YouTube now. As KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov reveals Russian subversion tactics. And there's a full interviews available. And G. Edward Griffin, who's a wonderful individual from the Reagan administration, and he was a deputy in the Treasury Department under Ronald Reagan. And he wrote the Creature of Jekyll Island, which is a really good book on the founding of the Federal Reserve. But Yuri Bezmenov, he gives the basic Soviet approach to how they subvert the West. And it's, you look at it, and this was back in what, like 1984, I believe, was the interview. But yet you see that it's like he's talking about what's going on today. And so consequently, yeah, it's very, very disturbing, and people have to stand their ground. My thing is, and I've been alarming about this for years now, is that it's the voting, stupid. It's the voting, stupid. Hello, it's the voting. It's the voting corruption. That's how they took over Venezuela. That's how they're planning on taking over the U.S. That's one of the most important aspects of what they're doing now. They want to make it, oh, you can't go to a voting booth. We'll have to do it digitally. We'll just have Bill Gates, like, he'll tally the votes for us, and then we'll decide who's going to run the government. I mean, that's spending on trying to do. Now, with the way in which President Trump has been kind of like acquiescing to some of this stuff, it just makes me get an uneasy feeling, because, you know, come on, doesn't he know that this is like the ultimate nonsense? And is this kind of like a 3D chess thing, or like what some of the people that like a particular letter of the alphabet, I don't even want to say it because they're getting blocked. Wow. You know, I don't know. I've spent so much time on all this. You know, like I said, this is something that I've been digging into for 45 years. I was talking about that the Federal Reserve is neither federal nor do they have any reserves. I was talking about that on the largest radio station in Detroit back in like 1980 or 1979, 1980. You know, so this is not anything new for me. It's gotten into new phases, and I think that people have to stand their ground. We have an inspired system of government in Potentia, because they've put so many levels of bureaucracy and corporatism that's masking the beautiful founding documents that we have. We really have to, people have to wake up. It's like what Ben Franklin said when he was asked, the woman asked him, what are you men doing in there? He says, well, we've given you a republic if you can keep it. And that's the key, is keeping the constitutional republic. And the world is counting on us, because like the Yuri Bezmenov says, he says, you know, this is the last stand for freedom. Right, America here. And he was worried about it then. I wonder what, you know, if I don't know if he's still alive, but it's definitely gone a lot farther down the road when you got a serious presidential candidate, you know, and he's entertaining ideas from a loon like Bernie Sanders. I mean, I'm sorry. Bernie can point out some things, but he has no solutions. They have no platform. And what is their platform? Can you tell me? Can you remember what Hillary Clinton's platform was? What was it? Oh, yeah, more of the same. Right. Okay. More of the same. That's not a platform. That's like a cultural suicide. That's her platform. These people are criminals. Keep in mind, they're desperate criminals. Okay. Her father was one of the two people that took over after they put Al Capone in prison for tax evasion. Okay, that's who her father is. Okay, we know that from Larry Nichols. And Bill Clinton told him, he said, do you know who her father is? He's the guy that took over after they put Al Capone in, right? Yeah. So that's her. And then you look at and you go, who's Valerie Jarrett? Who's she? She's like a big mob handler from Chicago for Obama. And then you have Nancy Pelosi. Well, her family is like the Baltimore crime organ. I mean, it's just, you can't make this stuff up. How in the world do we get like crime lords in key positions of power? And it's just more than disturbing. And it's the voting corruption, like the Governor Whitmer that we have here in Michigan. I don't believe that she actually won the election. I don't believe it. I think it's just, they were more effective in the voter corruption in the more recent election than they were in the voter corruption that put President Trump in. Now, I have inside information about certain hackers that were on guard preventing the hacking of voting systems in strategic states, and that helped prevent them from hacking the voting machines. Now, you know, they did a thing, if you remember, well, I think it was a 13-year-old girl was in less than 15 minutes was able to hack into a voting machine with her smartphone. I mean, that's what's sick. You can't have digital voting. No way. And no absentee voting. And you have to show that you have a right to vote, that you're actually a citizen. You know, we don't have like illegal aliens voting, which is what they're planning on doing in California. I mean, these people are crazy. I don't know what to tell you, but when you look at like, like Jane Fonda and her brother, I mean, these people, they really have a problem. I mean, I had a friend who was Jane Fonda's bodyguard, personal bodyguard. He was a former military guy who was highly proficient in Hapkido, which is an Okinawan form of martial art. And he used to tell me stories about protecting her from groups like Donald Lopsinger and Breakthrough and all that. But she's a nut. And these people actually think that they're better than you are, okay? Keep that in mind, okay? And that they're going to do us a favor. They're going to eliminate large groups of people, either sterilize them or just eliminate them altogether and make this a theme park for the elites.
Wow. Now, you know, to try and combat that, to close out on tonight, seeing as there's, you know, so much corruption with the voting, and we can't really rely on our leaders to do anything on an individual level. What do you think the answer is? You know, seeing as a lot of people are waking up to this, do we resist the mandates? Do we voice that we're standing up against this COVID nonsense? You know, what do we have to do? Because, you know, some states are making it a misdemeanor if you don't wear a mask. It's getting kind of crazy. Is there a way that we can stop this on an individual level? Well, yeah, it's a participatory government. I mean, people are sitting back like they're spectators. You know, spectator, that's from the word specter, like ghost. You know, they're like passive watchers. It's like they like to watch TV. It's like in Being There, the movie with Peter Sellers, when they ask him about the TV, he says, "I like to watch." It's like, and you know, there is a principle of nullification, for example, where you can nullify laws that are unconstitutional, but it's a procedure that people have to utilize. They have to take up initiatives. You have to find out who are the people in your area that see things like you do, instead of just trying to figure out how to get rich from being involved in politics like most of the idiots that are involved. You know, it became rich through politics. That wasn't the idea.
And so I would say you have to start getting involved with local politics. I mean, you know, when you get into like Isabel Thompson's work on dumbing down of America, the works that she did, she was in the Department of Education, and she started looking at the materials that were going out to the schools. She said, hey, wait a minute. This stuff is like, you know, neo-Marxist programming nonsense, you know, the Agenda 21 and all these various things that disguise themselves in your local areas under a different name. It's not called that in your neighborhood. So people have to get involved. You have to find out. You have to go to these meetings and find out who are the people that are actually there. You know, it's something that's definitely worth doing because your future depends on it, you know, and see the government. The federal government really doesn't have powers according to our Constitution. The individuals have rights and powers, and states have powers that have been designated to them by the citizens. But the federal government's function, it's supposed to protect our ports, protect us from foreign invaders, you know, levy excise taxes and import taxes, and basically protect our rights in the Constitution, which they don't give them to us. These are inherent parts of what we are as human beings, that they're given to us. And if you just go back to the founding documents, you'd see that these are inalienable rights. They're not permissions that are given to us by some government. You know, the purpose of the federal government is to protect the rights of the citizens. And citizens is even a squirrely word, because they take all these things and they twist them around in the court system, which is so tied into London still. I mean, if you are a member of the bar, that's basically a London organization, isn't it? You know, so it's disturbing, the interweaving. So what I would say is get involved. Find out who are the good people. Vote for the good people. If you think you're up to it, run for something. Because if you don't, there's plenty of these people out there that they don't think like you do, and they're not going to look out for you. You know, it's like for some reason, it's been fashionable in those circles to hate America.
Very well said. Now, John, thank you so much for coming on. That was great insights into what's going on, and we barely scratched the surface, so I'd love to have you back on in the near future. Before you head out, if anyone's interested in getting your books, finding out more about you, watching some of your videos, where can they do so?
Okay, well, I have my YouTube channel under my name, John Barnwell. It's very simple. I have 2 books. The first book is, The Arcana of the Grail Angel, The Spiritual Science of the Holy Blood and of the Holy Grail. It's the spiritual history of the path of the Grail. And it's a study that's developed out of the work of Rudolf Steiner, The Underground Streams of Esoteric Christianity, which flowed from the Brotherhood of the Holy Grail to the Order of the Knights Templars and to the true Rosicrucian order. And that's astronomical based historical cyclical study of all the various facets dealing with Kabbalah and so on and so forth. This is the Arcana of Light on the Path. This is more of a meditative tool, but they have in them, like, I don't know, 40 some diagrams explaining all the various aspects of coming to a more profound understanding of the symbols of esoteric Christianity. You can get those on eBay. I have them both available with free shipping here in the United States, continental United States. If somebody's outside the U.S., they're going to have to get a hold of me, and I'd have to make arrangements with them. But you can get there from there. You can get the information. I posted beneath my videos, so you could find them if you just go to my YouTube channel as John Barnwell. And I'm not a soccer player.
Right,
That's the
yes.
other.
I came across a couple of those soccer player videos. All right, John, thank you so much. Excellent information, and we'll definitely have you back on soon.
Okay, take care.